I got interested in constitutional law indirectly because of an interest I had developed with our northern neighbor, Canada. And as I started to look at differences between the United States and Canada, I found one of the more interesting areas of law where Canadian law is different than American law is with regard to constitutional law. So I became very interested in comparative constitutional law in that way. And the two most prominent areas are with regard to federalism and with regard to protection of broadly worded individual rights. With regard to federalism, Canada has a very different system than the United States. Their provinces are much stronger than the United States, individual states. But that reflects their history where a majority of Quebec are French. And the French realized that they will always be a majority in Quebec and will never be a majority anywhere else in the country. And my argument is that in the United States, we don't think like that. We aren't willing to have policies in our state, and we don't really care what happens in other states. If you're pro-choice, you want every American to have the right to choose. If you're anti-abortion, you want abortion illegal everywhere. And when people assert states' rights, it's only because they can't get a majority in their favor nationwide. So that was one area that I got interested in. And then the second area is individual rights, some of the topics that are currently under discussion with regard to due process, gay marriage, things like that. And Canada has a very broad approach, but their court is much less ideological than our court. They don't have 5-4 decisions. Their court is very consistent. When they've only had a Charter of Rights like our Bill of Rights since 1982. When it was first decided, and a long time thereafter, most of the judges were appointed by prime ministers of the Liberal Party. There's been a Conservative Party prime minister now in Canada for 8 years. 6 of the 9 justices have been appointed by this Conservative prime minister, and the court hasn't changed at all. And that just doesn't happen in the United States. So I find those comparisons between Canada and the United States useful, not just because I happen to be interested in Canada, but because they teach us more about our own country. One final example. I once saw American law professors say that the separation of powers between the president and Congress is essential for liberty. And I said, well, why do you say that? Because in Canada and the United Kingdom, they don't have a separation of powers. They don't seem to be a dictatorship. And it really makes us think about, well, is that really true, or is something else going on? So I find comparative analysis to be useful to tell us more about ourselves.